think it's wise that you mentioned before approaching that we should check that it's affecting us, because sometimes we'll feel the need to point out the dissonance and it really isn't affecting us. So therefore it's out of our control, out of our yard. And so I think that would solve a lot of conflict if we could just really stay in our own yard.
Yeah.
Welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. I'm Shai Lewis, and our mission is to help you, Christian married man or woman, navigate conflict and build connection so you can have a thriving marriage. Today, we are discussing what to say when there is cognitive dissonance in the room. So, I have with me Nina, of course, and I'm sure, Nina, you have heard of this term before. What are your thoughts on cognitive dissonance?
I think it's one of the things everybody interacts with. And it's the classic form of this is that I know that smoking is bad for me, and then I do it anyway. And by the way, I don't smoke, but equate that into, I know that donut or the brownie sitting on the counter in the kitchen is not what I need. I really should work out today, but I do or don't anyway, right? So our behaviors don't align with our values in a space, or we have conflicting values and we can't figure out what to do with them. So it's literally almost, well, it is kind of physiological, like a level of anxiety, even within our brain, our heart, whatever. We're just feeling angst. We don't like our choices, or we're influenced both directions, and we're having to make a hard decision, or we're not making the right decision that we say we believe in, right? So we have in our brain, and if we actually do believe that, then we're rubbing up against ourselves. It's kind of like sandpaper rubbing up against itself in your brain. It's like, that's a physical thing that happens to me anyway. It's like scrape, in my brain, something's scraping. This doesn't feel right. I don't like any of this.
Yeah. And I did look up the definition, by the way, which Nina is spot on. It says that cognitive dissonance is a term where you're in a state of discomfort and you have conflicting thoughts. This can show up in confusion. It can show up with, hypocrisy. It can show up with you just not having clarity. So there's all sorts of forms where this can show up in your life. And it can be something like what Nina just mentioned about, smoking, bad habits that we just don't want to break. Or it can be different levels of this. So where, you might have an idea of yourself or someone else, and it's just an inaccurate picture, and that gap needs to close. So we want to talk about all that today. But before we do, I want to send you to our website, greaterimpact.org. We have a free PDF that you can download where we talk about how to stop walking on eggshells. So if you have a moment, check us out in your free time. Okay, so today what we want you to walk away with is the what to say if you or someone else is experiencing cognitive dissonance. If you don't do this well, you can add insult to injury, create more confusion than necessary. So we want to help you guys really tackle this and get this right. So I wanted to share a story. I have a friend who's a runner, and she's been a runner her whole life. She's run marathons, she's competed in high school and college, and she's one of those people that can just wake up and run 5 miles, no problem, no training prior, I'm just gonna go for a run, and it's been like 2 months since she's done it. Amazing. Well, since crossing the 40 threshold, she's not been able to do that as easily, but she only discovered that, obviously by getting out there and, not being able to get very far. And so I thought that her mindset and her view of herself not matching up with what her body could do was a great example of what cognitive dissonance looks like. I mean, how humbling is it to be great at something for so long and then one day wake up and just, you know, your legs are like, no, not today.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Does that happen to you in your life, Nina?
Well, I thought you were talking about me for a minute until you hit the 40 mark, and I went, oh no, I'm much, much, much older than that. I was doing yoga the other day, and I'm not a big yoga person. I don't, do the spiritual elements in yoga, just to be clear about that. But I was doing some of the athletic poses in there, and I could not believe that. I mean, it's been a good 5 years since I've done any of this stuff, and I started to shake, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Am I really like, what happened? How am I this weak? I thought I was doing really well. Yeah. So cognitive dissonance all over that. It's humbling. You're absolutely right. So yes, I've experienced it. And I want to talk about one of the smaller places that
Okay.
this happens. And it happens all the time in couples. And I see this like almost every single day. And I've experienced it. So I'm not saying I'm better than anybody. But we'll have this thing where we're supposed to, like, we know we're not supposed to show up defensively or explain ourselves, justify, argue
Right.
back, right? We know that. And then someone will say something to us and we'll do it. And then later, and even in the middle of it, we'll go, well, yeah, but they're still wrong. So I'm not, it's okay. And then afterwards, maybe it's, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Well, yeah, but they were still, and we start rationalizing, it's like, okay, so which one of those values to show up in love, to show up in your strong identity where you don't have to justify, you don't have to explain yourself, or this thing over here where you're judging the other person as wrong and they need to be corrected, like which one of these is going to win, right? Because you believe both, but the one you actually believe the most is the one that shows up in our behavior.
Ooh.
Oh, right. I know. Stab me to the heart. That's rough, but
Yeah.
it's true. What we actually believe shows up in our behavior. And I work with people every single week. We do all sorts of deliverance and healing prayer. And I tell them all the same thing. You guys, this is like 5% to 33% of the work. You found the thing you believed or said you believed. You've discovered that's not true, that's a lie, or you made this vow to do these things, or whatever it is. Now you got to go walk out that you actually believe differently about yourself, about other people, whatever that means. And so, for some people, it means I'm going to choose to not get defensive. I'm going to choose to not argue back. It might be saying, hey, I love you and we need to take a break from this conversation, and boom, being gone right then. But it's that actual act of showing up differently. And it is as much work to do that. People go through healing prayer experiences, and we do it a couple times a week with people. And it's not this overwhelming, grueling thing. It's very calm. But emotionally, it's hard work, right? Spiritually, it's hard work. And you're listening, you're doing all that stuff, and you think, whoosh, that was a lot, right? Well, no, we're just getting started. The hardest part, I think, is for people to walk in the spirit.
Yeah.
And walk in freedom. And you have to do that, because if you don't, you stay stuck.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, oftentimes you're not even aware
Right.
that you've believed the lie or that you've made that vow or the stronghold exists. And the work it takes just to recognize that is there is enough. And then you got to replace that. And then you got to, like you said, walk it out. So this is not like small. This change that we're talking about, closing this gap between what's true and what's not, takes work.
Yeah.
And it's like you're rewiring your brain to, think differently. It's the whole taking every thought captive, that God talks about. And it's when I hear choose, I hear work. That's
Yeah.
what I'm hearing.
It is. Yeah, who likes that, right? The neatest thing about it, though, I don't want to leave people going, oh, great, thanks. Stop listening. No, I want to leave people with some encouragement in this space, because it is really, really hard the first time.
Yeah.
Your heart's pounding. I had a client whose parents were very, very controlling, and she got married, she had kids, and parents are very, very controlling. And they had this kerfluffle about visiting, and I don't remember all the details around the conversation, but it was something like, they were going to go see them, and the parents were like, no, that's too much trouble, it's too much driving for the kids, don't come see us. And they're like, but we're coming this direction anyway, we're actually going to be 3 hours north of you, something like that, and so we want to stop and see you. And the parents are like, no, that's too much work, no, oh, you're being silly, don't try, this is too much effort. And so they didn't go see them, because they kept trying to schedule this, and the parents were like, no. And then they get back from their trip, and both of her parents are mad at her
What?
for not coming and seeing them. And she's like, I don't understand this at all. Like, I tried to do that. And I said, okay, so what does it tell you? She goes, well, I don't know how to interact with my mom and dad over this. Like, I was supposed to read their mind and get it right, and I didn't. I said, exactly. And now they're mad at you. So what are you going to do about that? She goes, I don't know. I guess I'm just going to wait until they feel better. I'm not going to talk to them until. I said, how about this? What if you were to do something totally different? What would that look like? She's like, well, it's nothing I think I could do. And I said, you already know what it is, don't you? And she goes, yeah. Well, what is it? Well, I need to say, hey, I love you guys. I understand that you're mad at me. And next time I try to plan a trip with you, a visit, say yes, don't lie to me, because I don't read minds. I'm not going to play this game with you. I have too much on my plate to try to do this way.
Yeah.
And she just was mortified. She's like, I can't do that. I said, yeah, you can't, but Jesus in you can, because he didn't lie. And for you to pretend everything is okay when it's not, for you to be, trying to people please your way back into their lives. No, these people lied to you. You didn't do anything wrong. And now you're trying to win back their favor. No, that's outside your integrity as a child of God. You just love with the truth in this space. Don't be a jerk about it. But, next year you're going to have another opportunity, right? She goes, yeah. And I said, bet it goes differently. Sure enough, it did. So she told, oh, it was ugly, by the way. Lots of gnashing of teeth, arguments, slamming down the phones, all this kind of stuff. And she just gracefully handled all the conversations. And there was probably about 4 of them. And finally, she just said, well, what is it you would like me to do then the next time I try to organize coming to your house and imposing myself and my family on you when you keep telling me not to do it? What is it you actually really want when you say no? And so they kind of heard that. And they didn't answer the question. They hung up on her. And then, months later, when she's planning another trip, she says, okay, so she just acted like it was the first time that she'd ever asked for anything. She's like, hey, we're going to be here at this time. What days work? These are the days that might work for us. When works for you? And they gave her a date and a time, and they showed up, and they had a great time. So how's this related to cognitive dissonance? That whole thought process that she said she had in her head of, I can't do that.
Yes.
Yeah. So you lose the right to complain when you can't go fix the problem. Like, that in and of itself right there is, I feel terrible that this happened. They're terrible people. I'm judging, blah, blah, blah. I know what I could do, but I'm not going to do that because I can't. And that's too hard. Yeah, no, sorry, that exists and you really want to be that person. But the easiest way out is for those other people to change. And they're not going to, because you're teaching them how to treat you. So that whole thing that happens in our head is part of that. And I think that's the smallest piece of it right there.
I think that's the biggest piece.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm going to disagree with you, because I think that is the thing that gets those of us like me who struggle with that kind of conversation, setting boundaries, knowing what is healthy, but you're for the last 40 years of your life going to choose the easy way out. Like if you could just get to that place where you're able to overcome your fear, where you're able to choose what is healthy, you're good.
Right.
But it's just that mindset, that cognitive dissonance, that dance. Like, example, I had to say no to one of my daughters who wanted to do an after school activity, and she really wanted it really bad, and I wanted her to have it. Well, progress reports came in, and it would have been irresponsible for me to let her do this thing that would take up more of her time and mine, by the way, because I'm commuting back and forth for this after school activity. But it would not have been good for her to do this, given what her grades look like. So I had to make the very, very hard choice of disappointing her. And that was hard for me.
Yeah, of course.
And it was hard for her. And, I got to the point where I could not do it.
Yeah.
It would have been more irresponsible for me to say yes to this thing. And so I think oftentimes that is the place where we have to arrive, is what is most healthy for this situation, even if it's painful for that person, even if it's painful for us. What is the most healthy thing? And maybe that helps to close that gap, that cognitive dissonance that we're experiencing.
When you started talking about this, you said, what to say in this space to close that gap. And so when we're dealing with ourselves, one of the questions that, when I'm experiencing this, and I don't catch myself all the time, right? But when I do, the question I'm asking myself is, okay, what are you valuing? What are the conflicting values that are showing up here? And in your example, you've got the conflicting values of, joy at this activity for both of you. And then you have the conflicting value of responsibility, and maybe even another one of friendships being born. There's like all these things wrapped up in it. It's like, all right. And, as a leader in an organization, one of the questions I ask people when they say, can we do this? Can we do that? What would happen if we, what principles are we using to make decisions around this?
Yeah.
So I have people figure out their values first, and then bring that to the table to navigate that. So that's the question I ask myself, is what values are in play here? And, then I can discern, well, what do I value most? Right. And then I'm asking the Lord about these things too. Because you can be caught between two good choices.
Yes.
And that's hard. I mean, that's the worst of cognitive dissonance, I think, because it's harder to discern what it is you should be doing when you have, should I serve in Sunday school or should I lead a women's Bible study? Those are both really good choices. And you lose with both if you don't do the one of them, and you win with both. So it's like, I don't know. So cognitive dissonance, I think, can be eradicated by asking the Lord, what do we do? The funny thing, I think the tougher thing is, what do you do when you encounter it in somebody else?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And sometimes they're not aware of it. Yeah. That was going to be a question that I had. Like, how do you deal with that? Do you say, hey, there's cognitive dissonance happening? That's probably not a good approach.
Right.
But, you can see it, but they can't. I mean, is there a healthy way to bring it up?
Yeah. So, that's tough, right? So it depends on the situation, and it needs to be something that impacts you, right? Or is so pervasive that somebody needs to say something out of love, and you're not the only one noticing this, right? So there's a gamut there. So let's say that let's boil it down to a simple interaction, husband and wife, and the husband has a wife that consistently is arguing with him,
Mm-hmm.
And he sees that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got some dissonance over that, because as a Christian and as a woman, on top of that, because the data's in, we're typically more agreeable than men are. So there's this thing that's happening, is like, this doesn't feel right for him. She's very disagreeable.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of proverbs about contentious women dripping and living on the corner of a roof style. So it's a thing. And I'm not bashing women either, by the way, because men that complain and are angry, same thing, like for real. So you have that. So what does he do with that? He can choose to ask, to give feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, honey, are you open to a little bit of feedback about how we interact? I'm not sure if you're aware that this is going on. And she may be open to that. She may not. She might argue with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other piece of it is he might just have a boundary in that space. He might go, you know what, when you can actually listen to what it is I have to say, then I want to talk to you. But I've said half a sentence and you're already arguing. So this conversation's over. I love you, but no. So he's got a firm boundary there. So he doesn't put up with that behavior. But when he sees it, he needs to do something with it, right? Especially if it's sin, which, kind of ties into our podcast last week there, that you did around, I'm sorry, the author's name again. He was really good.
Oh, Judge Buck Levis,
Yeah.
or yeah,
The,
Judge Levis.
with the episode around pornography. So you have
Yes.
somebody who has, some sort of addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those things, if it's a lot of times you don't even know that it's happening, but when it starts to impact you, which it does, if you're in a marriage, eventually that addiction results in, unfortunately for men, erectile dysfunction. So then there you go. It's affecting, and it was probably affecting things before that. But once you start seeing those kind of things, then you have to bring that up, and you do it in a loving way. Hey, I love you, and I need to talk to you about something that's really important and kind of difficult. Are you open to having a hard conversation with me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I like to let people know this is a hard conversation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you don't, they think you're going to ask them if, to move their car in the driveway or something. Yeah, you don't want to catch people off guard. You want them to be on their best behavior, but not afraid. So you don't go into that angry. You don't go into that highly emotional. You're calm. You're under the influence of the Holy Spirit.
I think it's wise that you mentioned before approaching that we should check that it's affecting us, because sometimes we'll feel the need to point out the dissonance and it really isn't affecting us. So therefore it's out of our control, out of our yard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that would solve a lot of conflict if we could just really stay in our own yard.
Yeah.
You know?
There's some people that take the when a brother sins against you thing a little too far, and speaking the truth in love, like I had a woman come up to me at church one time and say, speaking the truth in love, your son's behavior doesn't represent your ministry very well. I'm like, what? He's a teenager. She goes, yeah, I don't like his long hair and his pants. I said, okay, well, thanks for letting me know. This is affecting her. Like, no, I mean, he wasn't. Anyway, yeah. Thanks for getting in my business, sis.
That's right. That's right. I don't think his hair affected her day as
No,
much as
and
he wanted it to.
well, and even if it was a situation where his behavior was somehow directly impacting our ministry negatively, which I can't even barely think of a situation where that would be a thing with any of my kids. But even with that, that's still not my yard.
Right.
And if somebody wants to decide for them that they can't participate with us because they don't agree with what my children are doing, who are all adults now, by the way, that's not my problem. And I'm probably grateful without even knowing it that they're not with us, right? Because I already have enough judgment in my life from the enemy. And, I don't need any more critics. So thank you for letting me know that my son's worship band is edgy for you. Thank you for letting me know that. Okay. That's going to ruin greater impact. Got it. All right. In our local church with 300 people in it. Sure. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, a little sarcasm there.
No,
I should have done that.
it applies. It is apt to the conversation, because I think that would solve half of our battles, is knowing really what's our responsibility. If it's us, okay, that's one thing. If it's affecting us, that's another thing. But if it is somebody else's yard,
Right. Well, and that's great to explore that stuff, because yeah, I remember the first time we launched one of our classes, Daughters of Sarah. I was standing at a booth in our church in the hallway, and this woman came up and lit into me because it was for married women. And I was like, what? She goes, I can't believe how exclusive you are. I said, I'm sorry. She goes, you are excluding women that are not married from this. And I said, well, it is a course on marriage. I said, I don't know how to include non-married women in a course on marriage, but you know what? Maybe God is birthing a ministry in you for single women. And if he does, you just let me know. I will support you in that. And she wandered off. She was still mad, but I didn't think twice about it, because I knew who I was and I knew what I was supposed to be doing.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If I had question around my identity and what God had called me to do, I'd be like, oh, well, maybe I should be doing that. Ooh, maybe I am wrong. Like, no, stop it. Let's get our values straight. Let's go forward in that. And sure, there'll be times when you stumble and you wonder, well, maybe, I had somebody tell me last week, strength and dignity should be for all women. I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe, but maybe there's some other thing that we could do for all women. We have been very focused on marriage, but maybe, yeah, but I'm not going to walk away from this other work that we're doing to do that. I might add that if he told me to do it. I'm certainly open to that. But, to receive criticism and then doubt my calling. Yeah, no, not going to happen.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So many great takeaways today on cognitive dissonance. I hope it was helpful for you. And just to quickly summarize, cognitive dissonance is this state of confusion where you believe one thing and maybe do another. And there's ways to close that gap. So if it's you and you're aware of it, which is a process in itself, you have to choose what is true. That's an intentional decision. You also need to speak what is true, and then maybe ask the Lord if it's still confusing. What is true here, Lord? If it is someone else and affecting you, then maybe approach it with gentleness, with love, asking questions, avoiding accusations. Things like, are you open to feedback? Setting a right time, letting them know it's going to be a hard conversation ahead of time can kind of soften the blow there. But the goal is to do this in a loving way. And of course, if you have to set a boundary, that might be necessary to get to the change and close the gap that is there. So several different ways to approach this topic that affects all of us, whether it's you're a kid, you're an adult, you're married, you're single. This is something we all struggle with. So there's solutions, there's ways around it if you're willing and open. So we hope this was helpful for you today. Check out our next episode on our channel. We think it'll help you out more. We have more fun conversations around conflict. Thanks for joining today.